as they. Oh, okay. Now the meeting's officially being recorded as of right now. So I don't think we excluded anything of particular importance. So I want to just touch on a few things as give you a little outline and meeting format and agenda for today. I think I indicated in an earlier email, our first meeting was about 3 hours. We went through a lot of the background material, a lot of the alternatives analysis that got us to where we are today, a lot for introductions, a little bit more filling in the gaps. So we're certainly not going to repeat a bunch of slides today. And you all have availability to the slides that were presented at the last meeting. I'm going to give a little recap from last week's meeting. Updates since the last meeting, not a lot, but just a little bit. We will touch on solicitation for additional ideas and comments for mitigation associated with this project as it moves forward. In particular, obviously this is for historic impacts, historic archaeological impacts with the project, and looking for mitigation ideas for NOAA to consider. Then I will give a little briefing on next steps and schedule. And I just wanted to touch on meeting format to avoid a little bit of a free-for-all. I'm going to ask everybody, all partners, and as well as consulting parties, everybody on this call, that if you raise your hand one at a time, you can actually, all the hands can be raised, and we'll select, as long as those hands are up, we'll keep having people the opportunity to comment and present ideas, but we'll do it one at a time. So if you have a question, anything that I'm saying or the process, just I think you all know the raise hand button. Let's see, where's the raise hand button? It is, you go to, where is it? I'm looking at my screen, and as often as the case, we all have lots of different screens. Share screen, chat. You can put. Where is raise hand button? I'm not seeing it on my screen.
Bottom center, but I'm not sure.
Yep, mine as well in the bottom center.
Okay, bottom center. Kind of. I guess I don't need to raise my hand. I guess I'm the one person who gets to blab away, but I will do my best.
Sometimes it's also inside the react button.
Yeah, I think that's probably where it is. So anyway, through chat or react, and then we will select on you. So that would be appreciated, just to keep some level of formality. So I'm just gonna touch base from a recap from our last meeting, just briefly, for those that you were not able to attend the last meeting, or just to refresh everyone's memory. We presented an outline of the Section 106 process, and gave an extensive kind of history of this project, with looking at alternatives, the MEPA filing, feasibility studies, outlined the area of effect for historic archaeological resources that has been provided to the Mass Historic Commission, identified that NOAA certainly will need to develop. This is not a project this project will absolutely need a memorandum of agreement. Any project that would move forward here would have, almost by default, even moving one stone here is a impact to historical archaeological resources. So there will uncertainly be a memorandum of agreement between NOAA as the lead federal agency and the Mass Historic Commission. Certainly, there will also be an opportunity for concurring parties to be signatory to that document as well. And when that document is put together, I can't say definitively when we will get there in this permitting process, but it will certainly be presented in draft form to the consulting parties to comment and provide recommendations at that time. So we will keep everybody in the loop as this project moves forward. Let's see what else I have here. Oh, and then at the other meeting, we touched on the variety of mitigation options that I've worked on a variety of other dam removal projects throughout the region. Some unique, as in down in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Exeter. We provided some specific examples of high quality mitigation with some recovery of buried artifacts that are now permanently displayed. Other unique opportunities such as the etching and interpretive sign at the public library that is located directly next to the Exeter Library in Exeter, New Hampshire. Just a couple of examples just to tweak people's interest and ideas. So we certainly want whatever ideas come to mind. And I think that kind of covers our recap from the last meeting. Since the last meeting, I've received, a few comments from some of the consulting parties with recommendations such as enhancing and promoting public access to the area, whether through be trails or a potential pedestrian bridge or access way. So anything that can be done to enhance public access to this area. Unfortunately, as we all know, it's not super accessible right now. But they're looking for opportunities to enhance that or at least make it safer, and the potential for some trails. Also recommendations that about pursuing the variety of alternatives, including not proceeding with removal suggested by the Middlesex Canal Commission, and with some specific recommendations there, as well as, if indeed the project does move forward, some mitigation ideas for funding compensation for past efforts with historic restoration and interpretation at this site. So I really want to encourage all consulting parties to provide any ideas that you have. The more that are in the pot, for lack of a better word, the better for this process. So I do want to encourage more comments of any sort. And probably after this meeting, what I will do is PDF, make photographs of these, and make anything that has come in associated with these two first consulting party meetings, and provide those to everybody so you can see whatever emails or comments have come in. So to try to keep this as transparent as possible. With that said, and I did receive in specific a request by the Middlesex Canal Commission to want to be able to speak today, or the association. I'm sorry, get the two mixed up. Doesn't matter. They both may want to speak. I hope more than them would like. Sorry, got a peanut caught in my throat. I encourage everybody with any ideas to speak up today, whatever their comments may be. And before we jump into new ideas, retouching on old ideas, I want to see if anyone has any questions about the recap, the process of what I just outlined, before we take additional comments from people. I see there's something in the chat. My apologies. I will have to drop in and out. Oh, Andrew Jennings. Okay. So if Andrew comes in back and forth, that's absolutely fine. If other people have to, I certainly appreciate that and respect that. And what I will do, and other project partners we will scan the everyone's names to look for any hands raised, and with no questions cropping up on my recap of the last meeting.
Sorry, I see one question from Howard Winkler.
Okay, great. And I saw one from Marlies Henderson as well. So Howard, your hand went up first. If you wanted to provide some questions on my recap right now, by all means, and then there'll be an opportunity for you if you want to raise some additional ideas once we get through this. So kind of separate those two out. Thank you, Howard. And Howard, introduce yourself and who you represent again. That would be helpful for those that don't know everybody.
Yes. My name is Howard Winkler, and I'm with the Middlesex Canal Association. And we have our own mitigation ideas about removing the dam. And I prepared a brief presentation that I would like the opportunity to present to you.
Yes, Howard, we will take that. I just want to see if anyone has any comments first about the recap before we will actually just let us get through to see if anyone has any
Thank you.
formatting questions, and then we will absolutely be happy to hear what you have to present. Thank you. Marlies, did I see your hand up? Maybe, I think it was.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
With all the recap that you provided and all the ideas that you've collected, could there be some sort of feedback on general feedback on the ideas to see how far we can go with the ideas, how big our dreams may be?
Yeah, I think it's premature at this stage. Like I said, let me pull the ideas all together, and then it'll be an opportunity. Obviously, I'm going to need to speak to it's. I speak to a certain degree for NOAA, but I don't. I need to obviously talk internally as well to figure out where and how this project is proceeding and what that what that full range and window of opportunity really is, and to get a better assessment with comments on the overall scale of the impacts that we need to mitigate for. So by all means, that is a legitimate answer that will be forthcoming. And at this point, I'm open to anything, and we will kind of gauge that scale in the near term. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Okay, since I do not see any more clarifying questions, I will go back to Howard first, and we will start off with Howard Winkler, representing the Middlesex Canal Association, with some ideas. I assume he's representing the association here, and they've probably met. And please proceed, Howard.
Yes, I would very much like to have the opportunity to share screen because I have a presentation.
I think Heather can do that. I'm not in the controls because she's handling the screen. Are you able to have Howard share screen?
Mm-hmm.
And Howard, may I ask, obviously want to keep this as focused on mitigation options as possible? Yes. Yep. Thank you.
But our mitigation object is not to take the dam down. That's a form of mitigation, and that's what I want to present this morning. The Middlesex Canal Association wants to present its viewpoint. We have not had that opportunity. The 106 process started relatively late. That is our entry into the process. This is very important to us. So that's why we want to have the opportunity to have you hear our position.
So Howard, are you able to share screen? It should be at the bottom for you.
Yep, I'm here. And I'm going to start now, right? I'm a
yes. Please proceed. Thank you.
I'm a retired mechanical engineer. I held a professional engineering license in Commonwealth for 40 years. I've had a lot of experience. I've done many studies. And I want to talk about the dam. The brief history of the dam, I'll move very quickly. As we know, there's been a dam and pond on the Concord River since the early 18th century. That was 11 generations of Billerica residents ago. The Billerica residents know of a dam and a pond at this site. That's all they know. The Summit Pond was created by construction of the dam in 1798. The dam, pond, and mills provide a unique scene for manufacturing history. The dam was formed what has become now the landscape, the dam. Granite block construction is historic, certainly. And someday the dam will disappear when the waters of the Concord River wear down the granite blocks. It has withstood 196 years of floods, 196 years of earthquakes. The destruction of the Summit Pond is one of the most important surviving features of the Middlesex Canal. And to conclude, the sight and sounds of the falls have brought pleasure to 11 generations of Billerica residents. The site is on the National Register of Historic Places. And let me also add, it's recognized by the American Society of Civil Engineers as a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark. Now, NOAA's evaluation for fish passage, in our view, is deficient, because fish passage can be accomplished by destruction of the dam or by preventive maintenance of the dam and addition of a fish ladder. The Section 106 consulting parties that we met, which we heard them at our meeting on March 19th, was interesting, but it was focused on dam removal. There was no consideration for the other alternative, and that is building a fish ladder. What's very important is cost. Maybe this is premature for you folks to start thinking about cost, but certainly cost will enter into your analysis, I hope. What is the cost comparison between dam construction and fish ladder construction? Taxpayer is going to pay the bill. The comparative study, cost-benefit analysis of fish ladder. Where is the study? How can we go ahead and remove a dam without looking at the alternative? Now, this was presented at the last meeting, and this will be the focus of the remainder of my talk, this table of benefit and impact. I went through the table and I extracted from it all the items I think can be subject to what I call quantitative analysis. These potential benefits here, I'm not going to read them to you because I'm sure many of you already know it, and the potential impacts. So let's delve into this a little more closely now. The problem with the benefit impact table is all assessments are qualitative. They're low, moderate, high, and so, in my view, are squishy soft. The benefit impact evaluations may or may not be true, and even if true, is the difference significant? And this is very important to me, and I want to bring this point across. There's a gentleman, a scientist named William Thomson in the 19th century, and he wrote the following. You could, as Casey Stengel would say, you can look it up. When you can measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. When you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. It may be the beginning of knowledge, but you have scarcely in your thoughts advanced to the stage of science. Quantitative decisions depend on numerical assessment, not qualitative. Let's look specifically at upstream passage of the target fish species. How many fish would get through the three rapids if the dam is destroyed? This is a very important number. How many fish would pass through a fish ladder? How many fish pass through the Centennial Dam fish ladder? They could get up the Concord River. I'd like to see that. Now, another item on the table was, I smiled at this one, decommissioning of an aging infrastructure. Well, I'm very old, so that's why I'm interested in decommissioning aging structures. Here's the Eads Bridge, spans the Mississippi River, built in 1874, 150 years ago. So it's old infrastructure. There's no plan to decommission it. It carries 4 lanes of highway and 2 lanes of a train track. Now, also very important, taking it from your table, the impact on the Billerica water supply. Climate change is a wild card. That has to be looked at by. There's the growth of Billerica population. There certainly is a strong probability of severe drought because of climate change. And what is going to be the impact on the Concord River flow and the Billerica water supply loss? I just wanted to just quickly say, I remember when I was living in Arlington, I now live in a retirement community, but the worst drought in Massachusetts history was the 9 years, including the endpoints, from 61 to 69. Quabbin was at its historic low level. In March of 1967, it had dropped to 45% of its capacity. And very worrisome at the time. No reason why it cannot happen again. And another thing, let's talk about Billerica population. There's more water is going to be drawn by the residents of Billerica. The population is growing and has grown. This one I really don't understand on a chart. And I just bring this out because I chuckled when I saw it. The environmental justice for Nyanza. Nyanza Color and Chemical Company committed multiple crimes by allowing release of heavy metals and organic compounds into the Sudbury River. EPA completed the cleanup in the early part of this century. And how does destruction of the Talbot Mills Dam provide environmental justice for Nyanza? I'm still scratching my head. The environment cost of dam destruction. That doesn't come cheaply. And what is the real cost? As I had said before, what is the real cost of dam destruction in dollars? Build fish ladders. Mystic Dam was rebuilt and a fish ladder was added. Santa Falls Dam in Winchester was rebuilt and a fish ladder was added. Talbot Mills Dam, add a fish ladder. We believe that NOAA Fish Wake team is in a state of overreach. NOAA moves fish. A simple, inexpensive fish ladder achieves the goal. Quadrant demonstratum. It is not necessary to destroy the historic Talbot Mills Dam to move fish. I just want to mention the Great Stone Dam, which is certainly an obstacle on the Merrimack River from which the fish arrive, hopefully will arrive at the Talbot Mills Dam. We don't know how many fish can get up there. Are significant numbers of fish getting over that dam to get up the Concord River. At this point, I would like our president, Jay Breen, to say a few words. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Howard. And Jay, appreciate your opportunity to speak as well. And please proceed.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jay Breen, president of the Middlesex Canal Association. And okay. So basically, as I understand the Venerable Howard's wish for a measurement, the two choices we have is to use renovate the existing fishway, which is at 104.4 feet, to get over the dam, or remove the dam altogether. Or the comparison is between using this here and going to the, right there, the 1700 map shows that the dam actually flooded out 3 falls. With the dam removed, there'll be 3 more, the 3 falls will be there again. Of the 6,000 fish which were lifted over the Lawrence Dam in 2023, how many of them are going to make it above the Billerica Falls Dam by going through the fishway? Okay, let me see. Going over the fishway, or going up the falls here. That's a statistic you can estimate. Right now, one of the engineers, Streamworks, has said the dam here, once the dam is removed, this falls will actually be a constriction, and one of the target species will not have the burst speed to get above the dam. But anyway, that's the number to get. How many which is the better way to go? To use a fishway or to take chances on a irregular flow over these three falls? I assert that it's more than likely that a fishway will produce more fish passing the Billerica Falls than will trying to get over these three falls that will occur. Anyway, let me finish up here. Okay, the nice thing about using the fishway in the dam, you can work on it in the dry. Right here are two men working on the Centennial Dam 3 miles downstream. Again, the fish have to pass up here to get to the Billerica Falls Dam. And apparently they don't measure here because there are no fish going up, but I'll let biologist Gahagan respond to that, I guess. Next one. Okay. Anyway, that's the Centennial Dam. The 6,000 fish which were lifted over the Lawrence Dam in 2023 have to make it up here and then make it past the Billerica Falls. Let me go. Here's the Summit Pond. This is the view off the deck of the new Middlesex Canal Visitor Center. The Summit Pond's rather nice, and I rather think it would make a good spawning habitat or nursery habitat for migrating fish. But I'll leave that to biologist Gahagan to see whether this is a good spawning habitat. Anyway, it's a possibility that the Summit Pond would make good spawning habitat. Okay, go on, next one. Here's the dam. Yes, it's kind of nice. Here's the new museum, the new visitor center here. Here's the view that we had from the deck. The deck is right here. Okay, the Middlesex Canal Commission has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars designing a park, the Middlesex Canal Park at the Summit Pond. Apparently this is to be made useless. But anyway, here's the Summit Pond, all removed. Again, I think this is prime nursery habitat or spawning habitat for the migrating fish. Reason to give it up. Okay, next. Okay, to go over the falls, also someone said there's no flood control provided by the Middlesex Canal Dam. Well, that's because the gates haven't been set to work on these outlets. But you can work on the fishway. If there's any, you can use the fishway in the dam, and you can experiment because you can work on the dam, work on the fishway by draining the pond through these low gate outlets or through the Faulkner Canal. You could also drain the pond to working level on the fishway through the Faulkner Canal. Anyway, there is flood control just by putting gates on these outlets. Let me see. Director Calvin, I presume you're in favor of removing the dam to make it more exciting for the Zoom people tackling the rapids, the 3 rapids in the lower Concord. Anyway, it's quite, I think this is more recreational than anything by exposing the falls, the 3 falls above the dam. Anyway. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. I'm I'm just looking at hands up here. One moment. Dan Valentine. And again, identify who you're with, Dan, for everybody's.
Actually, I think Mr. Lincoln had his hand up before mine, so I'll defer to him first, please.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, Tom Lincoln, please. I'm just looking on my screen. That's all.
Hi, I'm Tom Lincoln, the chair of the Middlesex Canal Commission. We're opposed to removing the dam. A couple of things here. We submitted an extensive commentary letter on March 28th to Mr. Hutchins and the proponents, which states our position on this. Basically, we feel that there is a compromise in the works here, certainly a possibility of a compromise to ensure retention of the historic resources, which would otherwise be completely destroyed by the removal of the dam, and the goals of improving fish migration. I'm not going to read the letter. I hope people have read it and have taken it seriously. I do want to say that, like Mr. Winkler, it's a little dismaying that we seem to have glided over the alternatives part of the section 106 and are only talking about mitigation. This whole project is a zero-sum game. The gain with removal of the dam, the zero part of the sum is left with the historic resources. Basically, there won't be any, or certainly none worth interpreting. I am not going to challenge the science per se, but I think the science is being used a little bit as a bludgeon here, and I think there's some gaps in the conclusions. I would ask the question, won't climate change make all these predictions bogus anyway, or certainly at risk? The proponents claim that this dam removal would open up 126 miles of habitat along the Concord and the tributaries, which is a lot of miles. But we really don't know how much of this is good for fish already. We don't know what the conditions are on that. At least it hasn't been laid out. How much would need additional restoration, etc. And we would ask, is the Concord River system clean enough for fish throughout this 126 miles? I know it's not all the Concord River, but it's certainly that plus the territory. So there's a compromise sitting right in front of us here. Give the dam to us with an endowment. If NOAA can't pay for the endowment, and we know NOAA can't own dams, it would be against all sorts of regulations. Then one of the other private partners, like Oars, perhaps ought to see that it's in their interests to support this kind of compromise. Number two, instead of spending millions of dollars taking down the dam, cleaning up the Summit Pond site, paying for all that archaeology, which seems a little dubious to me, let's put in a fish ladder. Mr. Hutchins told me on Monday that a good fish ladder gives you 70% success rate for the fish. Maybe it's lower, maybe that's a high-end number, but we got nothing now for the fish, and that's a heck of a lot more than what we have now. And then there's another cost here. Instead of spending large sums required for genuine mitigation, in this case, perhaps NOAA should fund, and its partners should fund a scientific solution that allows the dam to stay and the historic resource to remain and help the fish at the same time. It seems like a very reasonable solution. The investment that has been made by the Middlesex Canal Commission, the very physicality of this site, which is a rare opportunity to show an important part of Massachusetts history, the investment by our partners, the Middlesex Canal Association, in a museum that frankly had started at least 6 months before this project was even conceived. You can't say you didn't know about it. All of that is at risk of being entirely obliterated here. And there's been talk about mitigation of things like interpretive panels. I always think about interpretive panels. Why would you put up an interpretive panel if you already have the real object right in front of you? It seems really counterintuitive and kind of a slap in the face of people working on historic resources. If we're going to talk about mitigation later in the meeting, I guess that's on the agenda. We have some very specific requests there, but we think that we need to work through this compromise on retaining the dam and providing a fish passage through a modern fish ladder. I will reserve my right to comment later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Since you quoted me, it gives me at least one opportunity to provide a little clarification. In our conversation yesterday or the day before, you had asked me what I would expect from a fish ladder at this site. And I said, from the seat of my pants, 40, 70%, maybe passage. And often, we know many cases, zero. So I do not want to present this as though this is that anyone has put a finger on saying we can get 70% passage with a fish ladder here. Unfortunately, sadly, we have far too many examples nation and worldwide where the best designed fish deliver us de minimis passage. And part of the problem is we just don't know what goes on in the head of a fish half the time.
And Eric, can you explain why we do fish ladders? Why would you even do a fish ladder in some cases?
Yeah, in some cases, well, there are a number of cases where fish ladders, and almost similar to that earlier slide where there was a dam, a bridge retained. There's a lot of dams that actually still have a function. There's roads over dams. There's water supplies that are critical. So there are hydro stations. So there are many cases where a dam needs to stay, or the determination has been made it's going to stay. Fish ladder is an alternative. And sometimes getting 40% passage is the best that can be regulatorily completed, unfortunately. Okay.
Can I comment on that? If I might, yeah. I think disparaging other fish ladders is really not a logical way to approach this. The fact is, each situation is unique. To say that, and it's actually a little bit of ironically, it's a little bit of indictment on the public sector, who that has proposed fish ladders and then failed to implement them. That's not our problem, and that's not the problem here, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Mr. Valentine?
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. I'm actually logged in twice here, once on my laptop and one in this conference room. So I'm going to try and share my laptop screen briefly. And I hope to make this quick to, again, touch on the issue of a technical fishway. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Okay, thank you. So obviously some people here are focused on the fishways. Mr. Hutchins, you indicated the questionable nature of the passage rate or the variable passage rate of fishways. This is one of the sort of promotional images that's been presented where you say just removing just one dam will open up the yellow areas shown here. But what's not clearly mentioned is that there are 6 dams within the green area, all of which have fish ladders. Yet the MRWC deems these green areas habitable for migratory fish. So on the one hand, if you argue against the effectiveness of the fish ladder, but yet here you're almost citing the effectiveness, because if you look at the extent of the green area shown here, the vast majority of it is upstream of at least 2 fish ladders, in some cases 4 fish ladders. So I think the idea that having a fish ladder at Talbot Mills is somehow unacceptable, yet it's acceptable at all these other dams, is a little bit disingenuous. With regard to the condition of the dam itself, and sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm getting ahead of myself here. My name is Dan Valentine. I'm on the Billerica Historic Districts Commission. I'm also a structural engineer and a licensed attorney in Massachusetts. Getting back to the structural issues, from a study that was done, the dam is in fair condition. merely because of the lack of a maintenance and operations plan. Structurally, there were no NOAA deficiencies, and that applies to all the dam inspection reports that I've reviewed. There are quite a few of them over the years. It also says the spillway appears to be adequate for the design flood. Going to an earlier Gomez and Sullivan study, it says it can't meet dam safety regulations to pass the 100-year flood. Yet this type of dam is intended to work by overtopping. The spillway on one side of it is not intended to control the flow. This is a run-of-river dam, as numerous people have pointed out. So in terms of the technical fishway, Gomez and Sullivan concluded it would provide effective passage for the target species. Also worth pointing out that there's a history of fishways being here. Obviously not up to present day standards, but I think installing a fishway in a way could actually be historically accurate. Obviously it would be a better one than what was here previously, but there is a long history of fishways being here, and obviously people fought over them. So Gomez and Sullivan conclude a fishway will provide effective passage, and it is a viable alternative for restoring the diadromous fish. And this was sort of a conceptual design, which I don't think people have an issue with. I would even consider potentially an alternate like this that's on both sides of the dam. So that's all I had. Just thank everyone for listening.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. And all of your slides will stay part of this presentation as well. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to put together some slides. Andrew Jennings.
Thank you. I would like to raise the issue that this Summit Pond and dam are unique and should not be treated simply as a typical New England mill pond. My name is Andrew Jennings. I'm a nearby resident to the town. I am fascinated by transportation history. I'm a member of probably a half dozen railway historical societies, the Middlesex Canal Association, bus associations, transit associations. But this uniqueness as a summit pond, and a very early summit pond, creating a canal system that was basically an engineering marvel that the Erie Canal copied, really needs to be preserved in any mitigation that takes place. Excluding what was done hundreds of years before this dam along the Salt River for hundreds of miles of irrigation canals, this was not the first, but one of the first and canals built. And the predecessors were ones which were short falls bypasses, but this is only the second that linked two watersheds. And the first in South Carolina was a much simpler process with very few locks and none of the viaducts and other engineering analyses. The canal promoted many engineering breakthroughs. It was recognized as such by an early Secretary of the Treasury. This is really a unique historical artifact that if the dam is torn down, the mitigations have to be very different than the typical New England mill pond dam removal. And it's really got to celebrate the uniqueness of this location. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Another hand up from Marlise Henderson.
Thank you, Eric. I just wanted to have a few things mentioned after hearing the different presentations. I live in Billerica, actually North Billerica, walking distance from the dam. I'm also a member of the Middlesex Canal Association, but as a Billerica resident, I have an interest in the drinking water source that the Concord River provides, and I trust the reports that the drinking water will improve in quality. The quantity, we can't change anything about it because that's just how the river flows. But the quality will improve and it will reduce the treatment expenses. So that would be an improvement by dam removal. And then with a growing population, I can see that a drought, a serious drought, would be a problem, but it would be a problem more so with the dam than without the dam. I just wanted to have that on the record. As for the spawning habitat comment, the photo was very nice from before the infestation by the water chestnuts. Those are choking for the water fish. Whatever lives in the water gets choked out by the water chestnuts. So I don't think it would be a very good spawning habitat. There was a lot of talk about fish ladders, but no mention of who is going to pay for that. I understand that the money that is available for dam removal is not available for a fish ladder, and the owner is certainly not willing to pay for it. I appreciate this session, the several sessions to talk about mitigation. I'm very curious to see where it's going to lead, because I do stand with Andrew Jennings that the Summit Pond is worth memorializing. And I've mentioned before how I see that fit. I don't think I have to repeat that. And as a certified interpretive guide, I disagree with saying this, the comment that interpretive panels are not as good as the actual exhibit, natural exhibit. We've had that dam for as long as I live here, and it took me a while before I realized how special it was. And that didn't come until I saw interpretive panels. That's as much as I will say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlise. Tom Lincoln, you have your hand up again, and by all means proceed, but I'd like to hear from anybody else that hasn't spoken, but go ahead, Tom.
I think just a comment on one comment on the interpretive panels. Of course, interpretive panels can provide additional information, but I think it's a little disingenuous to say that they replace the actual object in front of you. I ran the Royal House and Slave Quarters in Medford for 13 years. And you know, we debated whether we should add interpretive panels, but felt that we had the actual original building, just like the original dam and the original Summit Pond, and we didn't need them. So I think that's a really, you know, it's a nice thing, but it ain't a substitute. It is not a substitute. I'm afraid that we're still dismayed, if that's the right word, or unhappy about the idea that this project is being presented as a done deal and as a zero-sum game. It feels like the historic resources are an afterthought here, that some crumbs might be thrown our way in terms of mitigation, although certainly we can certainly make a very good argument that if you get to mitigation, there's a considerable what is that? Sorry, there's a considerable bill due on that if we get to that, get to the point. You know, we can argue all day long about fish ladders, but I think that Not to try it seems, basically saying that, we have absolute certitude from the scientific standpoint that removing the dam is going to result in all these benefits. And I'm not sure that argument holds up. I think there are way too many factors that we don't know about, probably can't know about on that side of the ledger. And the Section 106 process is designed to minimize the damage, the effect on historic resources by federal actions. And taking down the dam is not minimizing the effects when there is the serious potential for a reasonable compromise right in front of us. Now, if we want to talk about mitigation, that's fine. But I would say that needs to be talked about with the understanding that we haven't successfully moved to that point, or the proponents have not successfully moved to that point, and we're certainly making the argument that they have not done so.
Thank you, Tom. I'm just looking through to see if any other hands are raised. Scrolling. All right. Howard Winkler? Howard, you're still muted. Sorry. Unmute yourself.
I have done that. Thank you.
Me too. Too many
I
times.
just want to, just to reiterate, the most important item on the list that I have discussed this morning is the movement of fish. That has to be quantified. And that has to start at the Great Dam in Lawrence. How many fish are going to be getting over that dam? How many fish are going to be coming into the Centennial Dam? How many fish are going to be going over the Centennial Dam? And there will be any fish to get up to the Talbot Mills Dam. That has to be quantified. And we're just whistling Dixie, and we're just playing games towards dam destruction unless we have a firm answer to how many fish can we move. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. J. Breen.
Yes, by removing this block, by jackhammering it out and lowering the pond to the level that makes this, it's a simple way to give a test of how effective a fishway would be. You can experiment, just jackhammer the block, and there's a fishway there. Again, there's no need to keep the pond at this level. You could run the pond through the Faulkner Canal or through the low-level outlets on the left side. Anyway, that's one easy test to do. Unfortunately, there's $100,000 worth of paperwork just to remove this concrete block and then lower the dam, lower the water level in the summit pond to this level, to whatever level will accommodate the fish. Anyway, that's my suggestion. Thank you, Eric.
So, any more comments or ideas? I'm going to cattle prod you all because I want to hear what they may or may not be. We're certainly taking to heart everything that's being said about fish passage. And we will continue to reach out to our partners with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Division of Marine Fisheries, and the experts in our own agency to evaluate our fish passage alternatives here, though fish passage has clearly been identified as one of many reasons for the alternatives analysis to have the preferred alternative at this point. It's not just one objective. It's a primary one for our agency, but our alternatives analysis incorporates numerous considerations. ownership, permitting, longevity, climate change, many factors. But we will look deeper into that as well. Susie Bresney, please, and identify yourself and who you represent.
Hi, I'm Susie Bresney. I'm with the Division of Ecological Restoration. I was just wondering, Eric, if you or maybe somebody from PAL could sort of articulate the difference between alternatives and mitigation, and what what phase of the project looked at alternatives and what phase looks at mitigation, and sort of where we are now, just to kind of clarify exactly what are the goals of this effort right now, and what what has already been done in terms of looking at alternatives. I know it's been articulated before in previous meetings, but for the sake, if we have new folks or people who hadn't joined previous meetings, just kind of articulate what's happened and where we are now and what we're kind of aiming to achieve here.
Yeah, I'll just touch on that. But in a nutshell, the MEPA process, is quite frankly, since 2014, beginning the alternatives analysis, that even at that stage of this was looking at factors associated with historical factors and practicality of alternatives presented through that process is where it pretty much pulled together. And that did include Mass Historic, and pretty much all of the partners on here is identifying the preferred alternative selected, frankly, by the owner who's on this call today, but backed up by our consultants' evaluation of alternatives, the practicalities of fish passage, and meeting the goals of the project. Best I can explain at this point. So there've been multiple steps as that graph was identified. Yeah, it doesn't all have numbers in it, and often alternatives analyses have a certain level of qualitative nature. But I see that maybe might be valuable to, as this project moves forward in permitting, to make sure that some of these issues are articulated for everybody's purposes better. I'm not sure how many people had the opportunity to review the broader Merrimack River and diadromous fish restoration plan that was put together by both the state of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NOAA. Evaluated every river and river system, and evaluated all the dams and impediments for future fish passage benefits. And this project was highlighted as high as top 5 projects in the Merrimack River watershed system. So we brought in multiple documents to help hone in on that preferred alternative. Thank you, Susie. And let's see, scrolling through. Okay, Mr. Lincoln's hand is up again. I'll give him the floor while we get some time. Go ahead, Tom, and unmute yourself.
Okay, just for clarification here in terms of our going forward and what position we're going to take from the Middlesex Canal Commission. Correct me if I'm wrong. The message that we're getting here is that the alternatives train, the alternatives analysis, the alternatives process has already taken place somewhere off stage here. And so that we can no longer, under the Section 106 process, we can no longer talk about alternatives. So then any talk about the fishways, any questioning about the scientific basis, the assumptions, as Mr. Hutchins says, some of the qualitative analysis, which is pretty squishy, but that none of that, is any longer on the agenda. So all we can talk about now going forward in terms of the historic resources, which is our primary interest, although we certainly love fish, all we can talk about now is mitigation. But mitigation can be anything within reason that makes this situation as reasonably whole as possible. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so when are we going to talk about that? Next meeting?
Wait, I'm not sure what your question is then. You'd have to repeat that. I'm
Well,
sorry.
this meeting was set up as mitigation. We've mostly talked about, the door has been closing on the alternatives, despite all the work that's been reasonably proposed here on the Fishway. So if I'm not saying we agree with this, but if mitigation is the only topic left, are we going to talk about it now, or are we going to talk about it soon?
Yeah, actually, as indicated in the agenda for this call and my introduction, that is what this call, and that's part of the reason for today's call. So I'm asking anybody on this call, regardless of your interests in this project, to make suggestions, detailed or otherwise, about mitigation for if this project proceeding forward. So this is an opportunity in our first, we brought up at the last call, and I'm being quite open. We're looking for your ideas for compensatory mitigation for historic resources at this site.
Okay, would you like to hear ours?
Absolutely.
It's in the letter, but I'm going to reiterate it because I don't think everybody's heard it here. Okay. I'll try to summarize this because it's a little long here. We believe that the Middlesex Canal Commission, I can only speak for them, needs to be financially compensated in an amount sufficient to remediate the following losses and damages. Money is already spent by the commission in planning the proposed Middlesex Canal Park at the site. Compensation for the permanent loss of irreplaceable historic resources in an amount sufficient to allow the commission and its partners to adequately interpret the history of the canal at the site, assuming that's even possible. Mitigation funds sufficient to enable the commission to provide suitable on this site infrastructure for the public at the dam and Summit Ponds site. So what I think we'll have to do, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, what we'll have to do is we'll have to attach some real numbers to this list of mitigation. And I think that that process can be done. It may be a little bit of qualitative, but if you can do qualitative, we can do qualitative too. Does that sound reasonable?
Absolutely. No.
And again, I would reiterate with express condition that that is not removing our right to demand to work for a healthy compromise involving fish passage.
Yeah, and
extension of the dam.
I just want to say I respectfully agree with your statement, and under no circumstances will I or our agency take away your opinions, no matter which way this project moves in the future. It will not be you forced to agree on something. You may.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's no evil intent here, and I think this is something probably everybody on this call recognizes, that this is unfortunately, it's life. This is a location, I imagine, in every single dam removal you people have ever done is unique in the fact of the number of historic resources, and we want to be sure that we recognize the other social goods, the other social benefits. Marlies Henderson just sent me a note about that, in terms of the ecology, in terms of the fish. People here don't know me from Adam, but I have a long track record personally of advocating for open space, habitat preservation, that sort of thing. Don't know much about fish, and that's been plainly obvious. So I appreciate that, and we'll move on from this point accordingly.
Jill Griffiths, you're muted.
Hi, yep, thanks, Eric. This is Jill Griffiths. I'm with Gomez and Sullivan Engineers working on the project. I just wanted to clarify, thank you, Tom, for your suggestions and kind of walking through that again. I just wanted to clarify one thing that you said about that the alternatives analysis has already occurred off stage. It has already occurred, but it wasn't really off stage. It was initiated during the feasibility study phase back in 2014. And there were 2 public meetings during that phase. And then we had follow-up meetings with, and Mass Historic correspondence was initiated at that time, and correspondence to the potential consulting parties. And then there were several follow-up meetings with some of the groups on this call in the intervening years. So I just wanted to, and I think Joe Gould popped a link in the chat to all the previous, analyses and correspondence that has occurred to date that folks can find online there. So I just wanted to point that out. But again, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Mr. Winkler, Howard.
Thank you, Jill, for telling us about these other studies. Where can I get hold of them? I'd very much like to read your alternative analyses.
Sure. So the alternatives analysis was first published in the feasibility study, which I think Dan was showing some slides from. That can be found. So everything can be found. I don't know if you can access the chat if you click the chat button, but if not, I can just email you directly.
That'd be
Howard?
very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll do that. There's a website and I can point you to, there's two main sources to find the alternatives analysis. The original one, as I mentioned, was within the feasibility study, and then it was updated and expanded for the MEPA Environmental Impact Report, which was filed earlier this year. So that's probably the best source to go for the most up-to-date information. I'll send you a link to both.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I may jump in, there is a hard copy at the museum.
Oh,
Of the
there is
environmental
a
impact report, Marlies?
I don't
Okay, great. Thank you.
I don't get to the museum too often as I no longer drive.
Okay.
Just to add to that, if any of you saved the slide presentation from our March meeting, the links to the different documents are actually in that slide presentation as well. So we're certainly,
I have that.
so they're actually available at a couple of different opportunities. So if anyone's having any trouble with that, reach out to Jill, myself, Ors. We will make sure that you have access, whether the hard copy from that's at the museum or the links that are in that slide presentation. If there's any issues with that, let us know.
Thank you.
So
Go ahead,
the
Jill.
conversation started with mitigation. I think that's great. So are there others that want to chime in with mitigation ideas or suggestions?
I will make one unilaterally that I think many of you've heard at meetings that I've attended, both one-on-one and at some meetings. At the very least, where this project goes, assuming it goes, there is a unique opportunity, unlike many projects, if not all that I've worked on, is that a local group actually has a display museum visitor center being created that is a fantastic opportunity for whatever. There's a fantastic opportunity for probably as good as any project I've worked on, for not just a display board, but for whatever it may be. But it's very unique. I may not want that alternative, but if we go down that road, there is a great opportunity, and I want to challenge everyone to think of what might be appropriate to install in the museum as it takes its years to reach completion. Thank you.
Eric, can I say something?
Yeah, please identify yourself and who you represent.
So my name is Bob Martin, and I am the owner of the dam. While I respect the opinions of everyone today, I would just like you to see if you could place yourself in my position of having the financial and the liability associated with the ownership of the dam. It's something that is very difficult to comprehend unless you're the owner, placed with that liability. And it seems like no one would like to step up and say, we'll take over the dam as an individual. Although I did hear that the Middlesex Canal Commission would like to take the dam over. That same conversation happened 20 years ago when the Middlesex Canal Commission said, pay us to take it over. And we said, we can't do that. So now I'm hearing the same story. If it's that important to the Middlesex Canal Commission, then we ought to have a detailed discussion on that. And that should be part of the consideration versus the opportunity to open up the fishways, which I am a proponent of. But at this point, I respect the opinions that have been shared today, but I have to underline and underscore the concern that I've been living with for the past 25 years. The improvement of the quality of water was cited by Marlene, which I think is a positive issue. The one thought that I had was, what type of discussion would we have had the dam not been in place and an individual or a company want to put the dam up today? Why not let it go back to the way it always used to be and allow the water stimulation, the flow of the water, the passage of the fish, and consider that as an alternative? Because that's the way it used to be. And there are other towns that are discussing that today. So I just wanted to share those thoughts and thank everyone for their thoughts and considerations on this.
Yeah, I want to, since a lot of this conversation this morning and in past comments, but today in particular, is continuing to compare a fish ladder standalone to a dam removal. One thing that needs to absolutely be incorporated into any discussion along those lines, and one upon which any alternatives analysis incorporates, is the word practical and practical alternative, which means viability. There's not going to be a fish passage person out there that's going to say, we're going to get all of the fish over this dam for one. The other is we get pretty much zero of the other ecological benefits associated with dam removal, and there are many, and social. The practical side is, from experience on literally hundreds, if not thousands, of old dams of this nature across this country, the practicality of a dam that currently is privately owned and someone taking over a dam of this age at a large main stem river, for all practical purposes, the Concord's pretty main stem, maintaining this dam, someone building a fish ladder, someone maintaining the fish ladder. I've looked at the administrative record and spoke to people in the town of Billerica town government and attended numerous Middlesex Canal Association, a couple of meetings, and looked at the meeting minutes over the years. I wouldn't wish ownership on this dam for anyone, from my knowledge, because the liability that comes with it. I will say that outright, and that's part of the practicality of experience in this arena. The Middlesex Canal Commission nor the association, as far as I know, they don't have staff. To own a dam and to operate a fish ladder will require engineering studies in perpetuity. It will require fish biologists and maintenance people in perpetuity, people at the dam site every single day of up and downstream fish passage seasons, unclogging the fish ladder with any stick that gets clogged in it. High hazard for someone to even be near a fish ladder. Life preservers usually require 2 people because you wouldn't work on it with just one. The expenses are extreme. The funding for that, for all practical purposes at a dam of this nature, non-existent. That's where practicality comes in on a practical alternative. So I need to put that out there. It's not as though a fish ladder can't get some fish upstream. It's the practicality also. The federal government's not putting fish ladders on old dams and paying people to maintain them and hiring staff for them to do all this when a practical alternative is removal to accomplish everything. But it will come with historic impacts, we understand, and respect. So I just wanted to get that practicality component of alternatives analysis on the table. Thank you. Jill Griffith?
Susie was first. Go ahead, Susie.
Oh, thanks, Jill. Yeah, and since this is a meeting about historic mitigation, I just wanted to offer the consideration and note that I think we would be really remiss to not discuss the history that existed before the dam was there. There's a rich history of Native Americans living in this area for thousands of years that was, you know, really erased when colonists arrived and when this dam was built. And so I wanted to provide the kind of consideration and thought that removing the dam is mitigation for that history that's been lost. And this is an opportunity to kind of regain in a very small way a little bit of that history of the river. So I wanted to provide that consideration for people to think about as well.
Thank you, Susie. And that's certainly something that's also included in the historical and archaeological documents here. Just for clarification on that, it's something that I've learned over my 20 years of doing this work, just never thought about it quite as much when I first started, that almost every location, dams are always built where there's a drop in a river grade. That way there you gain head to create power. Almost every location, I'll stand on this, almost every location where there was a drop in grade is a location where there was either a pool or fish would congregate as they made their way upstream. Historically, these would have all been historic sites for indigenous nations back to about 12,000 years ago. There are summer, winter, or permanent encampments. I can't tell you where, but where we've done some archaeological exams, one site that I worked on, very similar to this, at a smaller river, every single test pit came up with indigenous artifacts, every single one. It's very common. These are the historical sites for Native tribes. So it's something to be considered in this mitigation and archaeological review of this project. Mr. Lincoln?
I cannot resist commenting on the business of practicality. The fact is that it is completely impractical in a capitalist society to preserve history with no profit motive is what we're doing and what the Middlesex Canal Association is doing. And that has to be recognized. The other thing is, yes, of course, there's pre-colonization history, if that's the right word, here. Yes, that's important. There's certainly a number of ways that can be recognized. For example, if you want a radical idea here about it, why not give some portion of land in this area, which is being done in the Redwoods in California, back to indigenous peoples. If they're not there, make some sort of contribution, or whatever the word it is, some sort of effort to ameliorate or to compensate, if that's the right word, for centuries of historic injustice. But I don't think that one of those ideas or one of those histories overcomes another. We don't have, and I don't know every place in Massachusetts, but I can't think of too many places where we have a historic remnant, historic structure, broadly defined historic landscape of that reflects this part of history. So to remove that in order to reveal something else, I don't know. It seems kind of odd to me, but I'm not quite sure why.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Libby.
Oh, you're muted, Tom. Sorry.
I don't see his mute.
I don't either. It doesn't look like you are, but we can't hear you. So maybe you have to change your audio settings.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes my computer just does weird stuff. Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Yep.
we got it.
Yep. I can hear you.
So first, so I'd like to, if you don't mind, if you can just tolerate something for me for 1 second, I'd like to introduce myself uniquely. So, Nina Migamawaj Aktelawisi Secham Kitu Apita Takan. I am the current chief of the Greater Lowell Indian Cultural Association. And what I just said to you in my language is that I am of Mi'kmaq descent and my name is Eagle Rising. So I am of Native American descent, right here from New England. And I'm trying to kind of just wrap my head around everything going on. This is my first meeting here. I'm new to this project. I've had probably one conversation prior to this about the project that's going on, and I'm trying to understand all of the sides involved. And Eric was, and Mr. Lincoln, I gotta commend you on, being able to recognize that this is beyond the study phase, and we're talking about mitigation. I look at it from a different perspective, of course. I'm not looking necessarily at it mitigationally, but I am looking at it from an opportunity standpoint. So what Mr. Hutchins was talking about being I find it somewhat disheartening when people put the last 400 years of history at a higher level of consciousness than the prior 10,000 years before that. It's very disheartening for us. It's very disheartening for me. You have a unique opportunity in this case that regardless of what happens here, you're never going to rectify what happened. Obviously, we all know that, and you're not removing one history to showcase another, but you have a unique opportunity to present all of the history in a very positive light. So again, I don't look at it necessarily as mitigation for us, but I definitely take it as an opportunity for us to speak our minds, put our stamp back on a location that was ours to begin with. That regardless of whether you feel it was natural accession, there's a lot of terminology that happens when you talk about what happened, whether it was taken from us, stolen from us, whatever. That to me is irrelevant at this point on how you interpret it. But the fact that opportunities like this do not happen for us every day, and when we find them, we're going to try to take them as much as we can. And I think that this group, I think there's a tremendous amount of positive things that could happen for the Native community in this situation, not just from an ecological restoration. And we don't know what we're going to uncover. That dam's been there since 1798. There could potentially be Native artifacts in there that we would want back if if you reduce the watershed there, or reduce the water volume there, rather. Sorry. There's endless possibilities for us with this particular opportunity. So again, I'm a guest here at this point. At least I feel like I'm just a guest listening in. But when our culture comes up, I feel compelled to at least acknowledge it. Number one. Number two, if you do have actual questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them for you. I'm a very, very well educated historian about the Native community in this area. And to Mr. Hutchins' other point, it is definitely it is without a doubt that what he's talking about with the drops in waters, that's where we would have put villages, hunting grounds, fishing grounds, all that stuff would have been absolutely at those water drops. So again, I just felt compelled to at least introduce myself. When somebody brings up our culture, I want to make sure people know that there is somebody on the call representing that culture. And if you have any questions, I'd be absolutely happy to answer them. So I appreciate the time, Eric. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Libby. I want to add one thing to that. I brought it up at an earlier meeting and also other public meetings where I've worked on a number of these projects throughout New England. Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts has been the focus of my efforts. And obviously, these issues crop up on almost all the projects, some less than others. But one of the opportunities, and I do want to hopefully make sure that opportunities are recognized. There will be destruction one way or the other, no matter what. Something hurts here, whether it's fish, environment, historic, but there's opportunities. And one of those opportunities, fun one, interesting and valuable, is what gets found and documented. So from my experience, whether I like it or not, if this dam gets dismantled, there will likely be photographs of every single block coming out, its actual structure, how it was built being documented and compared to anything that could be found in the archives. In particular, the old dam, the 1798 dam that we believe is just upstream, we're quite sure that's what that is, that bump in the stream, is probably going to have unique construction as well. That would be documented for longevity versus slowly rotting away underwater. Both historians and archaeologists would be on site looking for anything that may get dewatered on the edges, on the embankments, to make sure that something doesn't pop out of the ground, which sometimes does. And I've seen everything from entire cars emerge that no one even knew were in the impoundment. We don't want to find any cars here, but we found a lot of stuff over the years. And I've heard many people at both Middlesex Canal Association and Commission members talking about the flywheel and other things that are thought to be in here. One of the nice things about sediment that builds up behind dams, it buries artifacts, keeps them anoxic so they don't deteriorate. So there is an opportunity. I just want to say that, and that is part of the process of these projects they're in. I just want to present that as an opportunity. I don't know what we'll find, but it's really interesting. It's really valuable. And for me, and I believe others, it's actually fun to actually be there when an archaeologist finds something. It can cost us money because if we find something, usually it's on the spot, written in the MOA, you will stop your project right now until the state Mass Historic Commission and other parties gets here to evaluate what was found and what its disposition will be. So many checks and balances are built into a project like this to make sure that nothing willy-nilly is tossed into a dumpster or allowed to float downstream. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you. I will just, I told everyone that what comments come in following this meeting. So this will be recorded and shared with everybody. So you'll have a copy of both the meetings. I will see whatever comments come in through email, and I've had some phone calls as well from a couple people, but just I'll make sure that whatever gets portrayed either through these or the letters get shared with everyone. I've got just a couple of emails. We'll PDF them and make them available for everybody to see. And I will evaluate where we're at based on comments that come in, etc. And just to figure out our next steps. I mean, at some point, my agency will draft a memorandum of agreement. It'll be a draft that will not be finalized until this group has had the opportunity to comment and chime in on it. And I do expect that to take a fair amount of work, and hopefully something that Mass Historic in particular will provide a keen eye. In the end, Mass Historic is an arbiter to this process. Obviously, I'm speaking for my agency, and Mass Historic will be speaking on behalf of the Mass Historic Commission and potentially the Advisory Council as well. So this group would be working collaboratively with both those parties as needed and necessary. And I will make sure it's a transparent process with those documents in draft form. Not the early draft, once we have something that's worthy of sharing. And I will determine if and when we need to meet again on mitigation ideas. I would like to hear more defined ideas. So I'm certainly leaving that door open. This is not a formal public hearing process by any stretch of the imagination. It's our agency working with the consulting parties, but I'm not going to, behind closed doors, shut the door on any party on this call either. So I want to make that clear that, so please feel free at any of your upcoming board meetings, committee meetings, or individuals. If other ideas come to mind, please share them, and it'll allow any or all of us to find opportunities for beneficial aspects of this project, assuming, and that's an assumption, that everything moves forward in one way or the other. We all realize, I think, something has to happen here. That is one of the unique situations of a dam owned by someone for 20 years who's been trying to say, I don't want to own a dam anymore. That's a practicality issue that's going to have to be addressed one way or the other, independent of my agency. Any last comments before we adjourn, for lack of a better word? Happy to hear from anybody. We kept it to the 2 hours, unless things take off. Brian Kelder.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Brian Kelder with NOAA as well. I just wanted to put a point on what Eric just said. We're really looking to the folks on this call to get your thoughts and on those mitigation options, because you're the ones who know this site and know what would be best for mitigating those resources. So if you can think about it when you leave this call and come up with those concrete ideas that Eric mentioned, it will really help the process and help the outcome for everybody.
Thank you, Brian. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone. I will stay in touch. I certainly have everybody's email. I got most of your telephone numbers. We've got my administrative assistant has a stack of all your addresses. So as things move forward, and please, if
Joe, did you have a question?
Wait, yes, one. I'll get to you one sec, Jane. If anyone hasn't had a chance to look at those web pages, go take a look at the prior presentation that we shared with you, and look at that web page. And if anyone is having trouble reaching those web pages to see all the documentation from the past 9 years on this project, let us know, and we will help you. Jane?
I just want to make sure Joe's question. Joe had his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. I appreciate it. I really do.
Oh.
Yeah, Eric, sorry, this is Joe Gould, Master CMDR. Just a quick thing on what Brian said there. I just wanted to make sure that is all ideas on the table, or is there anything that we can't do, like, hand somebody $100,000 in cash or anything like that, for a project or not? Just wanted to make sure if we had any limitations, at least we said that up front to anybody.
Yeah, the key is mitigation associated with a project of this nature needs to be focused on the lost resource. And with any mitigation, obviously there's direct aspects, such as interpretive signage about the history of the site, or plaques about the site, or one of the things I've suggested if this project moves forward would be to take, for example, rebuild a section of the dam with the pieces in the parking lot, just so you can make a display that's directly associated. Getting further afield, like make this part of town look nice, that's not directly associated with the history of the dam. It's got to be associated with historical resources of the dam, not what's needed in this part of the town.
Yes. Hi.
Neil?
Yeah. First of all, I really respect what Mr. Martin said, and certainly Mr. Libby. I think our research tells us that the original dam was built in 1643. So we're almost 600 years into that. And I'm not clear where the Middlesex Canal Commission stands myself as far as their former proposal to take over the dam. But I guess I'm a little curious, is mitigation assuming that it's a fait accompli, that there will be no fish ladder and this whole dam is coming down? Because, you know, the only historic thing I can think of is that we get to build a bridge over the river where the floating towpath was, and be able to use it and go from the peninsula to right next to our museum, even if there's very little water there. So if you're talking about mitigation and using some monies to make up for the loss of the dam itself, that's something that I think would be worthwhile thinking about, a kind of a bridge where there was once a floating towpath, so that our sign on the observation deck showing the towpath that was very unique could be at least memorialized by a bridge. And it would be a good way to describe what happened. You know, and I'm curious what Mr. Valentine was pointing out about all of the other dams north of here that are still there, and you know, how much will they impact diatomaceous fish without the, you know, the assumption that, oh, they'll have no problem. And also, are there 2 people every single day at the Centennial Dam looking for sticks? I find that requirement seems to be pretty oppressive. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'll at least touch on that briefly. For anyone that may not know, the main stem dams on the Merrimack River are in the beginning processes of very, very significant federal and state agency review of their fish passage practices. And there are serious changes that are underway to be enforced through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Last year was actually a bad year for river herring. It was cited how many made it over the Great Stone Dam. For those of you who don't know, the particular reason why last year was a low year, which is kind of interesting, is because of our success with the restoration of striped bass. Striped bass came up the Merrimack River, and there were tens, if not hundreds of thousands of river herring that the bass were scaring away from the fish ladder, because that's one of the problems with fish ladders. They congregate fish at one location, which enhances predation. So now they're working on a predator deceiver at that site so that the river herring can make it through a mesh, but the large 30, 40-inch striped bass won't be able to make it through. So all of the main stem, all of the dams that were cited on an earlier slide, Amoskeag, Mine Falls, the 2 main stem Merrimacks, those are all under review right now, specifically to enhance fish passage. So agencies are looking at those, and we've been gearing up for actually many years, and we've hired new staff within a variety of agencies to look at those dams in particular. The Centennial Dam downstream is cooperatively working with partners. That's a hydro station, privately owned. If I had my way, I'd probably like to take the Centennial Dam down. But unlike Mr. Martin's dam, who doesn't want it, he actually makes a living off of it and is willing to work with all of the agencies with his own resources and some grant money. He's willing to go above and beyond the fish ladder that's there right now, which does not operate well, to build a whole plans are underway to build a whole new bypass channel, rock ramp at Centennial to significantly enhance fish passage there. Will it allow all of them to make it up? No fish ladder anywhere does, but should significantly enhance passage downstream. So I just want everybody to be clear. The two states and two state and two federal agencies are looking at all of these dams. In ORS and other agencies, we are looking at dams further upstream too. So the 135 miles that would be opened up with the Talbot Mills Dam Fish Passage Project potentially is just the beginning, because I can't remember what the number is. I think it's over 300 dams are in the Concord River watershed alone. Probably 90% of them have no functional purpose, and probably a high percentage of them aren't being taken care of. We're starting at the lowest common denominator where there's an opportunity of significance, which is Talbot Mills and Centennial.
It's also worth making the point that most of those dams, those other dams highlighted on the slide in the Merrimack, are upstream of this. So it actually increases the value of the increased passage here, because any trouble upstream on the Merrimack limits the access up into the other parts of the Merrimack watershed, raising the importance of the Concord.
Jill?
I think I just kind of wanted to respond to that too. I think you hit on most of the topics. I just wanted to clarify in case people aren't super familiar with the watershed and the dams. When Brian says that those are upstream, he means on the main stem Merrimack. So on the Concord River, when we've cited the 135 miles or whatever it is that would be opened up by removing the Talbot Mills Dam, that is dam free, so free of dams. And the other 300 and some dams that Eric cited in the watershed are, on tributaries and main stem rivers upstream of those collective 135 miles. So that is, a known entity, and the habitat potential has been studied and is deemed sufficient and quality habitat. And the other point I just want to make, Eric touched on this again, but again, the distinction, Dan Valentine's slides were very great and showed important, point about the hydropower dams. But that is a key distinction, that those are active hydropower dams that are regulated by the federal government. And they are required to implement these fish passage measures, and they spend millions of dollars on it. And they can do that because they're making a lot of money on this very large hydropower production. Small dams like the Centennial Dam is technically exempt from the federal government licensing for hydropower because they're very small and produce very little. So they don't have those resources to provide that manpower, and that's part of the reason their fish weight isn't as effective, and that's part of the reason that partners are looking into alternatives there to enhance fish passage. And as Eric said, the owner there is very cooperative and wants to help further that goal as well. So that's a key distinction, that there isn't the potential for hydropower at the site, certainly not major hydropower production that would come with the resources and funding to support a large fish passage program.
Yeah, and a question that came up earlier, this is Eric, about the quality upstream of this dam. I've canoed it a number of times now, and I actually work in the Great Meadows Wildlife Refuge, where some of the Nyanza money went as well to enhance public access for birding and wildlife viewing. The fact of the matter is, a big section of the Concord River is designated federally as a wild and scenic river. It's super high quality habitat in many areas, in many stretches. So this is not, I'd be more iffy on a system that wasn't this higher quality. But for any of those who have never been to the Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, go spend an hour there and walk around, and it will give you, without even jumping in a boat, it will give you a very good picture of how high quality some of the habitat is in this river system. And ORS is monitoring heavily almost on a daily basis too. So you've got good nonprofit watchdogs making sure it stays high quality for those of you that care about it. Joe Gould?
Yep. I just wanted to throw one other thing in there is that you mentioned earlier about federal funding. I just want to throw in the state funding aspects. I work for the state. Mass Fishing Games funding for this project also is limited to dam removal and is really focused on that. In full transparency, there is a program in the state, Dam and Seawall, that does help repair dams. That dam and seawall program would not be stepping in here over top of DER to provide funding for repair and passage. DMF also obviously has their regulations and jurisdictions here too. I won't get into that detail, but either way, I just wanted to make sure people realize that DER is really solely focused on working with owners through competitive process to and partners as well to remove dams that make sense from ecological as well as community benefit. So just wanted to do that, and that's where our funding is actually focused on. So,
Joe, thank you. Let me tie that what you just brought up into our conversation when we're talking about alternatives. When I said that NOAA and project partners, and in this case NOAA as lead, evaluating practical alternatives, pretty much a lion's share of my career besides technical assistance has been financial assistance to habitat restoration and stewardship projects. So I've kind of eat, slept, and lived criteria for funding, what's available, what's not available for what purposes. That is one of the things that we look into from a practicality standpoint. And I'll be honest with you, no one is running around funding to the tune of millions of dollars to repair privately owned dams anywhere. Those funding sources just don't exist unless there's a project purpose of utility. It's unfortunate, but that's the case. I mean, if a bridge was still passing traffic and trains, yes, money becomes available. If a dam is being used for flood control or it's a water supply dam, sure, money in grant programs is available for that. But I think all of us have seen when a bridge gets to the point that you can't travel on it anymore, and it's not viable to fix, those are the bridges that get typically replaced because there's not funding sources to repair a bridge to historical if it doesn't have a function and value anymore.
Yeah, and I'll just say that me and Susie Bresney, who's also on the call, really do that same thing for the state, and I agree.
I feel bad saying that in some ways. I mean, right now, clearly there's a lot of money for dealing with old infrastructure that doesn't have its original purpose anymore. All right, 10 minutes. We can give you all 10 minutes back on this Wednesday morning. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being on the call today. Again, all this is recorded. We hope worked last time, and I will be in touch with all those parties that have been identified in this process, which is clearly includes all of you on the call today, plus some others that weren't able to make it. Thanks, everybody. I will say goodbye and we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
I know.